Hello, welcome to Taiwan New Southbound Digital Trade Talent Cultivation 2022. We are on to our second hour of the course from Succeeding in Cross-Border E-Commerce. In this second hour, we are going to cover how to be familiar with your demand. We've titled the class, Know Your Demand, which should cover how you do market research in order to know your market better, know your audience better, and know your competitions better. So today, in the Knowing Your Demand topic, we're going to cover how having a market is always more important than having a great idea. We're also going to cover why some of product launches may fail. Actually, why most of product launches fail. The third topic is market research and the framework. How we're going to go about market research, why is it important, and how we should go about it if we are only a small to medium-sized business and we do not necessarily have the resources. Lastly, speaking of not enough resources, we are going to share with all of you on the free tools for market research. We have actually consolidated some really awesome templates for you to do all the different kind of market research that you may need. So definitely make sure you stay till the very end in order to download these templates. Okay. In the first topic, like I mentioned, we're going to cover how having a big enough market is so much more important than having a great idea. Why is this the case? I would love to know your thoughts, and you can leave it in the forum to communicate, to exchange ideas with me. But for me, my take is that sometimes we sit on this idea for a very long time. We think that it's an awesome idea and we want to prepare everything before we even tell people about it. And then once we launch this idea, most of the time we're going to face that our customers actually don't think in the way that we originally anticipated them to think. We're going to face the challenge that launching a product in the channel or in the location or the platform that we have planned for is actually not as ideal for the product at hand. Or we may realize that it's actually a great product, we have a great channel for selling it, but the amount of people who will actually need this product is just not enough. All of these are really basic, and I mean just basic challenges that will become obstacles for your idea to grow into a business, for your business to scale into an enterprise, for an enterprise to become a cross-border phenomenon. So if the purpose of you joining this course is to understand how you can think of your business idea from the bottom up and really have the desire to build a big business from a small idea, it's important for us to start thinking about whether the idea that we're currently working on have a big enough market. And we are going to look at the different ways that we can understand whether or not our market is actually big enough. before we get started, this course, actually throughout the whole 6 hour of this course, we are going to start off with one video. Now, this video features a very, very popular flower delivery service brand based in the UK. And we're going to watch a short clip on their commercial.
Bloom and Wild letterbox flowers, delivered through their door. Carefully packed bouquets, bold, bright, ready to bloom. Send a delightfully different bouquet. Now with £10 off your first order at bloomandwild.com. Make their day bloom with Bloom and Wild.
So you may be wondering, okay, Jennifer, the first hour we looked at Adidas NFT, and in the second hour you are showing us a flower delivery service. Why is that? What I'm trying to do here is to give you an opportunity to look at companies in different industries so that we can cover enough mass. So just because you are selling makeup, or you're selling clothing, or you're selling supplements, or you may even be selling online courses, you will be able to draw some inspiration from one company to another. Now, this flower delivery service, Bloom and Wild, is not just your typical flower delivery service. It was rated by Deloitte's UK Technology Fast 50 as the second place company in 2017, with the growth rate of 13,818%. It is by far one of the fastest growing startup companies that UK has to offer. So what do they do? Bloom and Wild, founded in 2013, is a letterbox flower delivery company, taking an online approach to the traditional business of ordering and delivering flowers. Now, I'm sure we have all purchased flowers in the past, whether it be for ourselves or for the people that we care for. Maybe for Mother's Day, for Valentine's Day, and we usually go to a vendor to pick up some flowers and then bring it back home. Now, Bloom and Wild as a startup is actually trying to make this whole experience a little bit more common for everyone. So they specialize in this concept called letterbox flower delivery. What that means is all the flowers that you order are carefully arranged as a bouquet, packaged in a box that you can take it to your post office, and the package can come through a letterbox. Their target audience is women in the millennial generation. Now, why is this an ideal target audience for Bloom and Wild? One of the key reasons is that this particular generation has traditionally been known for spending 2 times more in self-care than any other generations. So for a service like a flower delivery service, there is no other generations that could be better than this one. So Bloom and Wild started a company now, Bloom and Wild, a company now is almost 9 years old. In terms of awareness, there are 20% of people who know it, and the rest don't know about it. You may think the number is actually, you may think of the number being relatively low, but actually it is a pretty decent number. considering the fact that it's only a 8-year-old, almost 9-year-old company. Now, amongst the people who know about it, 62% of people will consider using it, which is actually a very good, which says a lot about the company. Now, what says even more about the company is the fact that 38% of its target audience actually prefer it over its competition. So what that can tell us about this company is that it actually has captured its ability to, what this can tell us about this company is that it has captured the essence of how to communicate with its target audience to have a very strong brand presence and a very sticky group of customers to actually be loyal to its service. But flower business aside, what I really want to talk about is actually one of the campaigns that the company did a while back. And the importance of talking about this particular case study is to tell you guys the importance in market research. When it comes to marketing for Valentine's Day, which is obviously the biggest holiday for flower sales, the company decided to go to its customers for marketing strategy. It posted a question of whether its target customers actually want to receive red roses for Valentine's Day. Now, to your surprise, or actually to my surprise, it was more than half of the people that it interviewed find that red roses are cliche, and 79% of the customers actually prefer a more thoughtful gift. So giving a bouquet of red roses during Valentine's Day just seems way too easy, or it's too cheesy. It's not bad, but it's a little bit boring. Or why is it that you're doing the same thing every year? There are so many reasons revolving around why a woman doesn't want to receive red roses that Bloom & Wild decided to launch a campaign called Red Roses, It's Over. This campaign means that during Valentine's Day, the company decided to not sell any red roses at all. As a customer, you won't be able to find any red roses on their website during this important holiday. You may be wondering, like, why? Like, you can just not promote it. You don't have to take it off the shelf, because what if there are other people who want to buy this red roses, but now they cannot? However, by going all the way out and listening to its audience, listening to its market, what Bloom & Wild has been able to do is actually increase its press coverage by 51%. And this 51% is a year-on-year growth, which means it still is currently in effect, even though it's a campaign from many, many years ago, at least 5 years ago. So now that everybody, when people think of Bloom & Wild, people will think about, oh, it's that flower delivery service that decided to boycott red roses during Valentine's Day. And that is a topic that people will be talking about for many, many years down the line. And that is what people are going to remember this company by, because the company did an extensive market research in order to understand what their customers actually want. So this is an interesting case study for how a company has been able to leverage market research in order to reach its customers. And that is why I keep saying, I title the topic that we're going through now, having a market is more important than having a great idea. Because what your market is able to do for the idea that you have is so much more than you can think of. However, we may not all be at that stage of being ready to launch very specific marketing campaigns for our company or for the particular product that we are selling. Because we may be at a stage where we're brainstorming what types of products we want to sell. Or we may be at a place where we're transitioning from being a traditional manufacturer to a e-commerce seller. A lot of these situations will require us to leverage market research for a very different purpose, which is helping us launch a product successfully. While market research is an important step that you should do every step along the way, it is definitely a step that you simply cannot miss during product planning stage. So in this particular topic, we're going to cover why product launches fail. So 75% of consumer packaged goods and retail products fail to earn even $7.5 million during their first year. On average, a family repeatedly buys the same 150 items, which constitute as much as 85% of their household needs. What does that mean for somebody who is trying to release a new product to the market? That means actually for your regular demographic, they're not frequently switching the items that they buy. There is that same set of items that they buy over and over again. And that already accounts for 85% of their household needs. In our previous hour, we actually talked about how Southeast Asia has a growing middle income class population. So household items is one of the most popular product category that they choose to shop online for. And with this knowledge of a family repeatedly buys the same 150 items and never switching it out, and that this amount already accounts for almost all of their household needs, how is a newcomer without any research going to be able to enter that market? The next important stat to pay attention to is less than 3% of new consumer packaged goods exceed first-year sales of $50 million. Now, $50 million, why did I mention this number? Because this number is actually considered a benchmark for any consumer packaged goods. If you cannot meet this number, your company will fail in the near future. If you do not meet this number, you won't be considered a successful enough company that will be able to sustain your own costs. So the last and definitely not the least point is that the biggest cause for product launch failure is the lack of preparation. What does that mean? That means you haven't done your research. You haven't planned enough beforehand before you launch the product. You haven't been able to account for the impact after you launch your product. For all of these things, they all fall into the work of preparation. And if you don't do them, that, well, actually, most companies don't do them. And so that is why most of the companies fail. So when we use this hour to talk about the importance of market research, at least we can have the confidence in knowing that, hopefully, if you do your market research, you won't be one of those companies that has a failed product launch. So, when we say lack of preparation, what does that mean? We are going to cover top 5 most frequent reasons why product launches fail and give you a specific product example. The number 1 flaw is that the company can't support the fast growth. The product we're going to talk about here is actually the mosquito magnet by American Biophysics. It's a product that you see on the right-hand side of the current slide. The problem here is the company wasn't expecting the product to take off in such short amount of time. So when it launched, it gained a tremendous popularity. So it very quickly had to shift its manufacturing basis from its low-volume Rhode Island facility to mass production in a Chinese factory. Now, being in Rhode Island or being in China is not the problem. The problem is that the company wasn't able to control the quality when it transitioned from a low-volume, small-scale manufacturer to mass production. So the quality of the product immediately dropped, and it resulted in many, many angry, dissatisfied customers in a very short time. What is the result of this? The company once had $70 million in annual revenue. Actually had to sell its operation for $6 million. The lesson, what can we learn from this particular example? Is definitely have a plan to definitely have a plan to ramp up quickly if the product takes off. You want to keep an experimental mindset in case your product fails. But a part of you, during your planning, you should also have a strategy for when your product takes off. Again, we go back to having a big market is always more important than having a great idea, because the market is going to dictate whether or not your product will sell. And hence, you cannot possibly predict how the market is going to react until after you roll out your product. So it's very important that you have a plan for in case the product doesn't sell and in case the product sells really, really well. The second flaw is the product falls short of claims and gets bashed. Now, product launch failures also happens to the biggest companies. It's not just a problem for small to medium-sized businesses like ourselves. It happens to Microsoft too. So actually, the product we're going to talk about here is Microsoft Windows Vista, the operating system. When the new operating system was in the process of being rolled out, Microsoft actually allotted $500 million for marketing. And it also anticipated at least 2% of its premium users to adopt to this new operating system. So what is the problem here? Microsoft actually, prior to the rollout of Windows Vista, allotted $500 million for the marketing budget. And it actually anticipated wide adoption within 2 years of its rolling out. So it spent a lot of money in a very short time to try to meet that goal. But what was the problem? The problem was that the software was actually not ready for this type of market adoption because it had way too many compatibility issues. It resulted in many dissatisfied customers once again, and which may not be a huge problem for Windows because, you know, it has a lot of customers. However, it gave Windows competition an edge here. The result here is Apple actually saw this as an opportunity, and they created a separate campaign. They call it I Am a Mac. And this caused many consumers to believe that Vista had even more problems than it actually did. So what can we actually learn from this particular flaw? Is that we should delay our product launch until the product is really ready. Now, this is actually kind of tricky because we say really ready. And what I'm really afraid of here is that you just hold off to your product and you never want to release it. So the definition of really ready, it should be looked at more closely, and you definitely want to push your product out to the market so that you can test the water as soon as possible. But whether or not you're going to spend 500 million US dollars to market the product when your product is still, when you don't know if your product is fully ready, that's a definite no. And that's why, you know, these days when companies roll out new products, we roll it out in beta, and then we slowly fine-tune. So there's a soft launch and a hard launch and an official launch and then a upgrade, etc. So we can actually plan the rollout so we can test the water as we go. The number 3 flaw is the new item exists in product limbo. Now this is a bit hard to understand, so I'm actually going to walk you through this particular case study. Does anybody remember Coca-Cola ever releasing a product called the C2? I think 100% of you is going to say no, because if you did, it would not have been considered a failure. So what was the C2? The C2 was actually a different product that Coca-Cola wanted to launch in order to target the men customers who also want the Diet Coke but don't want the feminine image of the Diet Coke. So they roll out the C2, which talks about half the calories and half the carbs, but in a very manly, in a very masculine packaging. Now, the problem was C2's benefits just weren't distinctive enough when compared to the already very popular Diet Coke. And its target audience just flat out rejected this hybrid drink. What is the result? The result of it is actually more problematic than you think, because it resulted in worldwide case volume from Coca-Cola for all 3 drinks to only grew by 2% in 2004. When we say 3 drinks, means the regular Coke, the Diet Coke, and C2, the new product, all together, the sales volume only grew by 2%, which quickly alarmed Coca-Cola to realize that its new rollout of C2 is actually harming the sales of its 2 very popular products. So what did they do? They very quickly phased out the product so that nobody can buy it anymore, and that's why none of us have ever heard of it. And now we have what's called the Coke Zero, a much manlier version in terms of packaging. it doesn't talk about half the carbs or half the calorie. It just talks about zero. We want 0 carb and 0 calorie. So the lesson here is to actually test the product to make sure that its difference can sway the buyers. This is important because we previously talked about expansion and how expansion can happen in more than one ways. You don't have to expand to a different market. You can just expand to a different product line. But when you do that, you need to make sure that your additional product line is actually different enough from your existing product lines. The number 4 flaw is the product defines a new category and requires substantial consumer education, but doesn't get it. So the product here is the Febreze Scent Stories. Even the name is hard to pronounce. Now, Febreze is traditionally a fragrance manufacturer. It produces products like the air freshener or scent diffusers for your bathrooms or for your toilets and for your household. It even comes in spray bottles that you can spray on your clothing. And a long time ago, it launched a product that is what you see on the screen here. It looked like a CD player. It is supposed to be just a thing that sprays scents to freshen up your space. But because it looked like a CD player, and the company also decided to hire a singer to partake in its commercial, this confused the consumers. They think that the device involved both music and scents, which was not a very straightforward product for them. And hence, the result is that the product actually just failed during launch because most of the time, the consumers are stuck at how do I use it. So this is the flaw we're talking about here. When your product requires a substantial amount of consumer education because it is so different from how the current consumer base is accustomed to in the category you are in, it can just cause too much education that your company is not ready to do. So the lesson here is, if your consumers cannot quickly grasp how to use your product, leave it, say bye, right? Or you should be prepared to do that extensive market education. The number 5 flaw is the product is revolutionary, but there is no market for it. I think this happens a lot when we are aspiring entrepreneurs. We want to start our own business, and we always want to do this thing that nobody has ever done before. That is actually one of the scariest things. If somebody were to ask you who's your competition, and you are able to say, no one, I have no competition. What that usually means is there's a reason that you have no competition, and that reason is because there is no market for your product. The product here, as an example, is the Segway. Not sure if some of you have seen it in your country, but the founder had high hopes for this product. It actually aimed that it will sell 10,000 machines a week since launching. But what turned out is that the Segway was actually only sold, they only sold 24,000 units, around that, in the first 5 years. So that's a big shift, right? That's a big drop. And so the result of that is it's selling for far less currently to police forces, urban tour guides, and warehouse companies. And it's not even that popular of a product that the company originally anticipated. And the lesson here is don't gloss over the basic questions. Who will buy this and at what price? When you price it so high and you just think that everybody is going to love it, you really need to do more in terms of customer research. Who is that target audience? Who can spend the money to afford a product at this price? So I guess it goes without saying that market research is really, really important. By looking at those failures, I think a lot of times, as we look at it now as case studies, it seems like a no-brainer that we should have done the research in order to prevent that type of failure. But a lot of times, what we see is that not enough companies, when launching a new product or launching a new business or even selling to a different market, will do the necessary market research or even know what market research is. I would love to know how, if any of you in the audience, in the listener, has done market research before and how you go about it. But regardless if you have previous experience in doing market research or not, here is a market research framework that I would like to share with you. First of all, in order to look at market research, we should look at what it actually involves. Market is so huge, right? So it means many different things. And that also is what market research is for. There are different types of research that you should do in order to help you understand a particular portion of starting your business. The first one is the 5 forces in industry analysis. The goal of it is for you to understand your industry better. You may find it funny that if you are starting a business in the particular industry, shouldn't that mean that you are the expert in your industry? Yes, you can say that. However, just because you are the expert in the product you're producing in that particular industry doesn't mean you have spent enough time in learning the history and the future of where your particular industry is moving. So the second analysis is SWOT analysis. And that is the second part after you've done, if you have enough understanding about your industry, the next thing you should definitely do is understand your competition. Again, competition is great. I don't care who else tell you otherwise, because having competition means there is a market. That means you are creating something that people already need. So you should love competition. But the way you should approach your competition, the way you should study your competition should definitely influence how you release your product, how you grow your business. The next part is buyer persona analysis. And the goal of it is to understand your buyers. Sometimes we just assume that buyers will operate based on what we think they will operate, and they turn out to be totally different. And that usually is due to the lack of research. So in this, all 3 analyses here make up for what we call the market research. And regardless of the stage of your company, you should have done some level of all 3, if not doing a very deep, thorough analysis of all three already. In terms of market research, we can generally divide it into qualitative and quantitative market research. The purpose of qualitative research is to go deeper into understanding insights into customer motivations and emotions. And qualitative research is to get reliable and standardized facts and statistics, most of the time just hardcore numbers, to guide key business questions. So the way we can generally understand it is that qualitative market research involves determining customer motivations through close observation. And in contrast, quantitative market research refers to the process of collecting a large amount of data through surveys, questionnaires, and polling methods. So these are some of the ways we can do qualitative and quantitative market research. Qualitative, a lot of times it's focus groups, which the cost can be expensive. The turnaround time is average, and the quality of data is really strong. Then there is in-depth interviews. The cost depends, right? Like if you can get, if a lot of people within your network can already offer the time for you to do interviews, and they are very knowledgeable people, very appropriate people for such interviews, then yes, interviews are great. The turnaround time, if you take the time to talk to the people, again, it varies, but the quality of data is very strong. The other types may or may not be so helpful, but what I want to point out here is the use of focus groups. Actually, these days with some mechanism like a meetup, you can actually conduct your own focus groups without having to hire without having to outsource a team. So the way when we started our company and we did focus groups was that we basically launch an event. We call it a design meetup, and we invite all the graphic designers in the industry to come in for an evening for beers and pizzas, and we ask them questions. What are some of the biggest challenges you face at work? What are some of the pain points you have when it comes to doing your job, etc. And so the cost was not expensive at all because it was just pizzas and beers. And you can get very valid feedback in a very short amount of time. And that data, because your focus group is a group of your ideal target users, the quality of data is very strong. And if you have a choice between focus groups and in-depth interviews, I would say the turnaround time for focus groups is actually much shorter compared to in-depth interviews, because, simply based on it's a one-to-many approach versus a one-to-one approach. In terms of quantitative market research, you can do online surveys. These days, it's really fairly inexpensive because there are so many free survey tools. You can just use Google Forms to ask some questions. The turnaround time is very short because you can, again, just ask on Facebook or Instagram and have people answer your questions. However, you need to bear in mind that the quality of data may not always be that strong because things may get lost in translation. When you're looking at the survey, the quality of the survey becomes very important if you're able to deduce what it is that you're actually asking. phone surveys and mail surveys, honestly, these days are just not as useful, because not only they are expensive to do, because you need to hire someone to do that. The turnaround time is also extremely long. The quality of data over the phone, yes, it is much stronger, because you get that voice to voice, you get that human interaction that you don't have that you don't have from online or mail surveys. But again, it is a very expensive and time-consuming approach. Then there is the intercept surveys and the mystery shopping, of which you can all look into if you wish. But these methods here, I think if you can just identify one or two to do, it would already be a great way to start your market research. So some of the free tools for market research here, we actually just rather than just giving you all the tools that you're not going to use, we are giving you some templates here that you can do on your own. Again, as a small business, you want to try to start out small. If you're not familiar with the concept of market research, it's best that you don't spend too much time figuring out how to use this software, how to use that software. More importantly, you just, grab your pen and paper and answer these questions. So when it comes to the 5 forces industry analysis, this is the typical framework that we will be looking at. If you really look at the page, it focuses on a few things. Threat of new entrants, supplier power, threat of substitution, and buyer power. All this combine and go into what we call a competitive rivalry. Now, we have also provided an example, so let's take a look at how this example, which is a cereal company, have answered this question. Supplier power, here it says ingredients to make and package cereals are all commodities, which means the supplier power can be very, very low, because these are ingredients you can get anywhere. Okay, what that means for threat of new entrants. There are no significant barriers to entry to the cereal market. Again, we go back to the supplier power, right? Everything that goes into making this product is things that you can get anywhere. And hence, it's very easy. It requires very low power to produce this product. That will also mean that the barrier to entry is very, very low, and hence the threat of new entrants is very, very high. Now, let's look at buyer power. People need food, but can skip breakfast and are price sensitive to foods like cereals and often look for discounts and bargains. So the buyer power here is very high here. What that means for threat of substitution, that means other breakfast foods, not having breakfast, drinking coffee, those are all alternatives that you can have to buying your particular cereal. So the threat of substitution is very high. What that means for your competitive rivalry is companies like General Mills have huge market share, so it is very hard for you to compete with them. So these are the questions. It's very basic, 5 questions that you should be able to answer. If you're not able to answer, that means you haven't spent enough time studying your industry. Because For any business, doesn't matter how new or how old the industry is, you should be able to answer basic questions like this to gain a general understanding of your industry. The next template is the SWOT analysis. And the SWOT analysis is often done to understand your competition. Again, I have to mention this again and again. Having a competition is a great thing, but it is important that we know how to go about how to deal with competition. So strength, weakness, opportunities, threats are some of the questions that you should be able to identify about yourself and your surrounding in order to understand your competition. And here we are using an example of Netflix. Netflix is an online streaming video platform. And what are its strengths? Its strengths is that it produces original content. And Netflix was first and is arguably synonymous with online video streaming. What does that mean? When you think of online video streaming, the first thing you think of is Netflix. Yes, it has algorithms to suggest shows to different audience for personalization. It deals with media companies for exclusive streaming. So now you can say it's a Netflix original. There are certain content that you can only see on Netflix and not on anywhere else. And it has a huge library of different content that you can watch. So these are its strengths. But what are its weaknesses? And even for a company that has as many strengths and are as powerful and popular as Netflix, there are still weaknesses. The weaknesses are prioritizing original content over proven favorites. Original content means it's something that you think your customers, your audience may like. But there are content that your audience have loved for many, many years. And when you make the choice of prioritizing original content rather than the proven favorites, are you necessarily satisfying your audience? The content can disappear at any time at the company's discretion. So even if the audience really loves a piece of content, the company can choose to take it down from Netflix at any given point if Netflix doesn't have the rights. Which means if the company has a better deal with HBO or Disney Plus, that content will quickly move and Netflix won't be able to retain it anymore. Prices have hiked in the past, angering consumers. Obviously, as a new product in the market, you try to use the low price strategy. However, when it comes to however, in time, you're going to increase your price, and that may anger your consumers and actually drive away your consumers. So what are the opportunities? DVD purchases and rentals are declining, and hence Netflix saw that opportunity. Netflix also saw the opportunity of younger generations are ditching cable in favor of streaming. It saw the opportunity of just internet overall, right? If your business can ride the overall internet penetration, then that's a huge opportunity. Another opportunity is that people consume more content today than ever before in history. Just like what social media see, right? People are now spending more time on their phones than they ever did. And that could be an opportunity for you. So what are the threats? Number of streaming competitors is growing. In less than 5 years' time, there's about 10 other video streaming platforms that I can think of in one particular country alone, let alone if you are a cross-border businesses that have to that can deal with different countries. So every different country is going to have its original content streaming platform. Media companies are gaining leverage and demanding higher payments for content. Again, if you don't own that content, if you're not the original producer of that content, the media companies that produce that piece of content can actually demand a higher royalty for that for the particular content. And some online videos are viewed for free or even illegally. So obviously, pirated movies, there are still plenty of sites that you can watch these movies or TV shows on for free, and that will definitely be a threat for Netflix. So these are how you should go about your SWOT analysis. Understand the strengths and the weakness, the opportunities and the threats for you when you start a business, so that you can understand how your competitions are going about it. Lastly, when you're doing your market and focus group survey, the important questions are for you to understand who your customers really are. What are their spending habits? What is the market actually like? What are the services that they are currently using if they're not using your service? Meaning those will be your actual competitions. What are your opportunities to grow, to build out, and possibly shift your business? All of those things can be designed in different questions in order for you to understand your market better. So to recap and to work through your own market research, we have created a series of templates. So before we get there, let's do a quick recap. Important notes from this hour that we should remember is, on average, a family repeatedly buys the same 150 items that account for 85% of their household needs. What that means is you are not going to be entering, it's not as easy for you to enter an existing market. And if that's the case, what are you going to do? Less than 3% of new consumer packaged goods exceed first-year sales of 50 million. The important thing here is 50 million US dollars. You can get probably a 30% location discount if you're in Asia. However, the number is still in the millions, right? So if you cannot meet that benchmark, you are not going to be a successful FMCG company. The biggest cause for product failure is the lack of preparation. Again, that goes without saying, and hence the whole topic that we are covering here is for you to do more preparation. So how do you do your own market research? We have created all the templates for you, including the examples that we just went over, as well as some of the sample questions that you can use to conduct your own interviews and focus groups. And you can just download the templates at the website that you see on the slide here. You can work through the templates. What you should do is present your findings with your team members, with your coworkers, with your co-founders, or you can even share your findings in the forum for our course, and other audience from this course can give you some feedback. Again, we're trying to cultivate a community here, so let's not let the conversation stop here. We can keep this growing, keep the conversation growing, and build the businesses together. So that's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. In the next class, we will cover cross-border e-commerce models, choosing between marketplaces and websites, and what are the important considerations and pros and cons when you do cross-border e-commerce. Thank you.